I'm Samurai Sam. Today I'm going to look at my imported Sega Saturn games from Europe first and then Japan. Saturn is a system that did not get a lot of games released in all three regions because it didn't do well in the West. So there's a lot of imports, like half my Saturn library is imports. So there's a lot to cover. Here we go. So let's start with European games. We have here Darius 2. This is a shoot 'em up. Actually, this is kind of an interesting port because this game was already like at least 7 years old, probably like 8 years old by the time this was ported to the Saturn. It had been on the Genesis before, but this game in arcades was a very wide screen shooter. Like it used like 2 or 3 different screens to like display it that wide, and so this Sega Saturn version fully ports the wide screen feature of the arcade, and you can actually use the L and R buttons to zoom in and out of the field as you wish. And it seems like it's a pretty good port. I mean, this game could really use like a actual widescreen version rather than one for 4:3 displays. But it's a pretty good game. I've enjoyed it. The main problem with it is that it's just hard to get power-ups because to get a power-up, you have to destroy an entire wave of fighters. There's never like one enemy that just flies out and gives you a power-up. So your basic shot isn't that bad, but considering how hard it is to power up, it's like one of those games where like once you die and you make it really far, it's like, yeah, you might as well just give up. But I do like the game. Here we have Deep Fear. This was the last Sega Saturn game ever released in Europe, and this was a survival horror game, clearly inspired by Resident Evil, but does a lot of things differently. Basically, you're these people in this, you're like a submarine or something, or a sunken ship, and like air is always an issue in this game because you're underwater, and you have to like keep refueling your air supply and stuff. And I've heard critics say this is definitely not as good as Resident Evil, but some people do like this game. It has really like cheesy voice acting, which it's kind of hit or miss depending on whether you like cheesy voice acting. But I mean, I guess that's kind of normal in horror games. I'm not that into horror games. I might actually sell this one, but I don't know. Maybe I'll give it another try someday. We'll see. Here is Hebereke's Popoito, another one of the Hebereke series I've talked about a little bit in this series of videos. And this is a puzzle game. This was also on the Super Nintendo, and this is 32-bit remake was on the Saturn and the PlayStation. And this game is very much like Dr. Mario. Slightly different, though. Not a total ripoff, but definitely conceptually very similar. I do really like the game. The big problem is that there's just not a lot of content here. Like, you can really see basically everything there is to see in one sitting, like, easy. It's really one that you kind of only want if you have friends you really like to play with all the time. Good game, just wish there were more of it. Here's KO Flying Squadron 2. I don't have the first one because it's absolutely obscenely expensive. KO Flying Squadron 2, I'm surprised this game didn't get released in America because it clearly has an American localization. This is mostly a platformer, but also has some like shoot 'em up levels and stuff, some variety. It's got really amusing, funny cutscenes that make me laugh. And gameplay's pretty good. It can be a little bit frustrating because if you don't have like a weapon equipped, then you die in one hit, and that can be a little annoying. But yeah, it's a fun game. It's not terribly long, but yeah, I recommend it. Although, I mean, the PAL version is a little expensive, but I mean, everything on the Saturn is expensive, just about. Not everything, but like most things, so you're kind of used to that. That's one I enjoyed. Here is Mega Man X3. This is one of my earlier Saturn imports. I actually imported this before the X Collection was announced for PS2 and GameCube. And gonna be honest, this is probably the worst version of Mega Man X3. I do really like the arranged soundtrack, but the two big problems with this version is one, the loading times take absolutely forever, and two, they had some kind of a problem with the resolution with the Saturn version, and you can't see it in the screenshots. But when you actually play the game, there are vertical borders on either side of the screen, so you're actually playing with a vertical screen. It kind of sucks. I mean, you're definitely just better off playing the X Collection version, which is the PlayStation version of the game, which is basically just this but better. So, yeah, not really that much reason to have this anymore. I might sell it, but it does have some nostalgia value for me, so we'll see. It was the first Mega Man X game I ever played, by the way, so that's something of note. Here's Parodius, personal favorite of mine. We'll be seeing more of Parodius in this series of videos, quite a bit more. This contains 2 games, the second and third games in the Parodius series. Parodius, well, in this collection they're called Parodius and Fantastic Journey. They're more commonly known as Parodius Da and Gokujo Parodius. And Parodius Da I don't think is that great. I think some of it's not that well designed. Some of the gameplay can be really frustrating at times. But Gokujo is one of my favorite shoot-'em-ups of all time. Basically, the Parodius games, Konami is spoofing their own series. They took Gradius's gameplay. They actually made the gameplay better by adding Twin Beast bells which makes it easier to recover after you die. And the game has really, really silly and whimsical characters, settings, and derivative music, like a lot of classical and folk music, as well as remixes of other Konami games. And it's just an absolute delight to play. I never really get tired of a good Parodius game, and this is something that is very, very worthy of my collection. I don't know what I'm talking about right now, but yeah, definitely the Saturn versions of Parodius are very, very good versions. I recommend them. Although it's not quite perfect, but I believe it's better than the PlayStation versions. Here's Shining Wisdom. This game actually did get released in America, but the reason why I have the PAL version is because this version was localized by Sega themselves as opposed to Working Designs, which looking back, I actually kind of regret not picking up, well, or do I? I sort of regret not picking up the US version because I do like Working Designs and like their packaging and presentation and everything, but I kind of don't regret it because Shining Wisdom really honestly is not that good in my opinion. I've tried getting into it a couple times and it's just really mediocre Zelda-ish game. A mediocre Zelda-ish game. And, yeah, really bad graphics, in my opinion. Music's alright. Gameplay seems like kind of meh from what I've played. So, yeah, I don't really recommend Shining Wisdom, unfortunately. That is it for my PAL games. And now let's move on to Japanese stuff. Let's start with Akumaju Dracula X Gekka no Yaso Kyoku, better known in America as Castlevania Symphony of the Night. This is kind of a port. I don't know, I wouldn't really call it an enhanced port, but a port with some additional content. Unfortunately, it's at a bit of a cost, as this version's graphics are a little worse, and I think loading times are a little worse and stuff. But there is some cool new stuff here. There's a couple new areas which aren't terribly exciting, but there are some like new items you can get. And the biggest notable feature is that you can play as Maria from Symphony of the Night. She wasn't a playable character before, and she's rather unique and kind of fun to use. So it's a cool version to have for Symphony of the Night fans. The PlayStation version overall is a better experience, but Saturn version is also, in my opinion, worth having. Astra Superstars. This is a fighting game that takes place in midair. So you can actually like jump up. You're still like sort of on a plane, as in PLANE, and like you can jump sort of, but you can also jump downwards in quotes, I guess. Yeah, this is a fun, fast, frantic fighting game. Uses the RAM expansion. A lot of fighting games for the Saturn use like additional RAM to help them, because Saturn was already really powerful when it came to 2D games, and the RAM made it even more so. And yeah, Astro Superstars, if you like fighting games, this one's a fun little unique one. I would recommend it. This is Cotton Boomerang. This is a Cute 'em Up, and Cotton is a series I've never really gotten into. This game seems alright, but like I'm not too crazy about it. I might actually sell it because I got it when it was not that expensive, and now I've learned it's a lot more expensive than it used to be. And I'm not super into it, so yeah, I'm not sure if I'll hold on to this one. It seems like an interesting game, but not like a must-have. Cyberbots. This is a fighting game, and this is best known for producing one of the characters in the Marvel vs. Capcom series, Jin, who debuted in Marvel vs. Capcom Clash of Superheroes. And he's a lot more well-known as a Marvel vs. Capcom character than a Cyberbots character. But yeah, this is a 2D fighter where you actually choose like a mech and a pilot for the mech, and haven't really gotten into it. Oh yeah, by the way, Japanese Saturn games are much less expensive than their English counterparts in general. I should note that. The Saturn actually did very well in Japan. Cyberbots is a game that was also not very expensive. Datana Twinbee Yahoo Deluxe Pack. So Twinbee is another series, shoot 'em up series by Konami. We've talked about it a little bit already. This contains 2 of the games in the series. And yeah, they're solid games. I can't say too much about them. I think I've beaten one but not the other, but that was like years ago, so I should probably play it again. The bell system on Twinbee, I'm a little bit torn on like what I feel about it. It's kind of neat, but at the same time it can be a little annoying to get the power up that you want, because you have to keep shooting the bell over and over until it's exactly the color you want. Then you have to stop shooting it, and you have to do that while dodging enemy fire and everything. So it's a little bit of a clunky power-up system, but I suppose it's not too bad. Here we have Dragon Ball Z Shin Butoden. I believe this is if not a sequel, then like at least a spiritual successor to the Butoden games on the Super Famicom. And yeah, 2D fighting game with Dragon Ball Z characters, and it's got like a mode that revolves around Hercule / Mr. Satan. That's apparently kind of interesting. I haven't played this one too much though. Funny enough, there's a little typo on the side there if you can see, because sometimes the sides of these Japanese games have English writing on them. So see, yeah, Dragon Ball Z. That's funny. Here we have Fada Remake, The Emblem of Justice. This is a remake of a Super Famicom game called Fada, The Emblem of Justice. And this version adds like anime cutscenes and improved graphics and music and stuff. I don't have the Super Famicom version, actually. The Super Famicom version has a English translation, fan translation. This version does not, unfortunately. This game is very Shining Force-ish in terms of like graphics and gameplay, and it seems alright. I'm not sure if I'm actually going to play this one a lot. I got it for cheap. But it seems interesting enough. Maybe I'll try out the Super Nintendo version first. I don't know. Here's actually literally the same game as we saw before. This is the Gokujo Parodius God Deluxe Pack, the Japanese version of the European game I showed off earlier. Why do I have both? Part of the reason is the European version you actually have limited credits, whereas this one you can continue as many times as you want. Another reason is there were a few little things that were tweaked, like for example, the bald eagle with Stars and Stripes apparel was color changed for the European version to seem less offensive to Americans, I guess. So I kind of wanted to have both. I'm a huge fan of Gokujo Parodius, so I really wanted to have both versions in my collection. So that's why I have this. Great, great game. Gradius Deluxe Pack. This contains both Gradius and Gradius 2. These are very, very good arcade ports. And I like both of these games. Gradius 2 is a little nasty with the difficulty, but I was able to get through it. It's not as bad, in my opinion, as arcade Gradius 3. But yeah, Gradius is arguably one of like the absolute top, most well-known, highly played, highly praised shooters in the West anyway. I don't know about Japan. But yeah, Gradius is really popular, and there's good reason. I think Parodius is better, but Gradius is still solid. Here is Grandia. This is better known as the PlayStation game because the PlayStation version actually came out here. The Sega Saturn version, there's a few differences, some graphical differences. Saturn version, I think, loads a little quicker. And this is actually the original version. The PlayStation version is just a port. Yeah, I think some of the graphics are better, I want to say. I think the backgrounds look a little better, if I remember right. But, of course, it is in Japanese, so that's something to deal with. But that version is also pretty cheap, too. But another interesting thing about Saturn Grandia is you can also get this, the Grandia Digital Museum. This is like kind of a bonus disc with a lot of extra features like concept art, music, and bonus and extras. Bonus and extras, I said. But actually, it has a little bit of a game attached to it, like a dungeon crawler. You actually roam dungeons and fight enemies and stuff and level up and to unlock all these beautiful features. And the game gets really, really difficult. There's a boss fight or two that are just brutal in this game. But if you're a real diehard Grandia fan, this is one that's probably worth having. So one cool reason to have Grandia on the Saturn, even though it's in Japanese, is that one of the things you unlock in Digital Museum is save files for the original Grandia. So like pre-constructed save files for you to continue from. I'm not sure if any of them are terribly noteworthy, like for any reason, but it's kind of neat that it exists. Here's Gunbird. This is a shoot 'em up from Rising, I think. No, Sikyo. It's Sikyo. I think, or did Sikyo become Rising? I don't remember. I think Sikyo and Rising are two different companies. But this is a fun arcade shooter. It's not terribly innovative. Like, it's fairly standard top-down fare. But it's just really well designed, fun to play. It's got quirky characters and such. Actually got a US release on the PlayStation called Mobile Light Force with terrible redesigned graphics and stuff. And actually this is coming out on the Nintendo Switch soon as part of like the Sikyo shooting. I forget what they're calling it in America, but this is going to be in America on the Switch, so keep an eye out for that. And yeah, one thing, this is a very good version. This version added like voice acting and stuff, but they didn't add an option to like scale the graphics to original arcade resolution. It's always going to be a little bit zoomed in, which I wish they had at least given you the option. But I'm still happy with this version nonetheless. It's a good game for the Saturn library. Here is, possibly my favorite shoot 'em up of all time. We got Jikyo Oshaberi Parodius, Forever With Me. And this was originally, well, actually, we looked at this already on Super Famicom, but this is a remake. Unlike most Parodius games, it was designed for home consoles and not arcades. And it shows because there's a lot of like features and content to sink your teeth into with this one. And actual unlockables and spruced up graphics and music from the Super Famicom version. This game is just a lot of fun. You can go back to it over and over again and make it a little different every time. And the Saturn version, compared to the PlayStation version, has less slowdown. And PlayStation version has some like extra bonus levels, which as far as I can remember, aren't that notable. Saturn version has a version called Extra that changes like the enemy bullet patterns and stuff a little bit, which I think is more interesting. So yeah, Saturn version of this is the way to go. Unfortunately, the PSP version is supported the PlayStation version. Yeah, Jikyo Oshabori Parodius, fantastic game. Highly recommend it. Konami Antiques MSX Collection. So if you've ever heard of the MSX, it's that old like PC console thingy that Konami made in Japan and parts of Europe, I think, back in the day. Konami made a ton of games for it. Unfortunately, Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2 are not on this compilation, but so many other games are. This was actually originally, I think, 3 different games for PlayStation, and they lumped them all into one for Saturn, which is awesome. And so there's a ton of games on here, and the most notable one for me is the original Parodius, which otherwise didn't come out on home consoles back in that day. Yeah, I haven't played these like a whole lot. Like, not every game on here is worth playing. Like, just some sports games you probably just never want to go back to and such, for example. But, some interesting stuff like, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, but Yar Kung Fu and, like, Antarctic Adventure, I think you call it. Interesting stuff like that. Cool thing to have for the collection. Here is Lunar Superstar Story, and this is obviously, if you know what Lunar is, it's an RPG by Game Arts. Very good games. The only reason I have this is because I got it for dirt cheap along with a game I'm going to pull out shortly. But these were released for PlayStation in America. There's really no reason to play the Saturn version unless you really, 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 really like the music and can put up with Japanese. Same goes with Lunar 2. Saturn version of Lunar 2 compared to Lunar 1, by the way, has better music. Saturn Lunar 1, I think the music is kind of this version of the music is alright. It's actually very different than the PlayStation version's music. But, it's kind of the same deal. It's like, the PlayStation version is in English, and it's perfectly adequate. You don't really need to go to this one. I got them for dirt cheap, because they came in a lot with the game I was going to get anyway, so that's why I still have them. I don't want to, throw them away or anything, and they're not worth anything either. Here is Maru Monogatari, one of the games in that series, better known for characters that appear in Puyo Puyo. This is an RPG, and supposedly really good, and supposedly fairly import-friendly, despite being a Japanese RPG, and without a translation patch. And, a friend of mine actually, I believe, really recommended this one. And, at some point I'll play it through, but I don't know when that'll be. I'd rather wait until there's some kind of a patch. But, I don't know if and when that'll ever happen. But, Maru Monogatari. I don't know why they didn't give it a subtitle, because there's a lot of Maru Monogatari games. Here's, Magical Drop 3. This is a puzzle game, by, who made this? Data East, I think. Yeah, Data East, whatever you want to call it. Basically, the gameplay involves, vertically grabbing these colored balls and then throwing the ones that you collected into a pile wherever you want and matching up colors and stuff. It's a very fun game, and very good multiplayer for people who are into puzzle games and stuff, and definitely not a Tetris ripoff by any means. Kind of unique, colorful characters. I've never played the first 2 Magical Drops, so I don't know how they compare to this one, but this is definitely a quality game. I believe the arcade version got released on the Data East Arcade Classics for Wii, which is actually pretty expensive now, I believe. But, I don't know, what's the best version of Magical Drop 3, but I know this is a pretty solid version. Okay, so the reason why I have Lunar and Lunar 2 on the Saturn is because they came with this game, Magical School Lunar. This is a remake of a Game Gear game called Walking School Lunar. I believe... Yeah, here we go. I believe this game doesn't have any actual connection. I don't think it has any connection to the other Lunar games. Gameplay is also, it kind of resembles the Lunar 1 and 2, but in practice it's actually not the same because your character's positioning in battle doesn't actually matter. They just move around like the other Lunar games and attack foes, in the same way, but, unlike the first 2, they'll never run out of movement, so the fact that your characters move around in battle doesn't actually matter. And I like the music of this one. Gameplay seems not that special from what I've seen and heard, but at some point I'll probably give it another shot. It has a trio of girls as the star, so they're probably trying to aim for a female audience with this. But, I like me some RPGs. It'll be interesting to see at some point. I would really like this to get patched. The Game Gear version does have a patch, this one does not. So, I don't know. Maybe this is another one I'll hold out for another 10, 20 years until it gets a patch. We'll see. Ooh, here's a good one right here. Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter. So, this game came out for PlayStation America, but that version was way worse than the arcade version. Not even close. This version is right up there with the arcade, with the only trade-off really being slightly longer loading times. This was the... Actually, because I'm doing this alphabetically, I'm kind of doing this out of order, but this is the second game in, the Capcom Versus series, and really fun tag team-oriented gameplay with crazy hyper combos and characters from all kinds of... Well, this one is specifically Street Fighter against all kinds of Marvel characters. But really like this game a lot. Fun to play with friends and even by yourself. I think there's some unlockables in this too, but yeah, there's also almost forgot to mention, there's a character in the Japanese versions of this game that is not in the American versions. It's Norimaru. It's kind of a joke character. He's like this Japanese tourist guy, and he's really weak, but he's funny and totally out of place. But just the fact that he exists makes me smile. So cool to have that version. Here we have oh boy, Police Nuts. This is a Hideo Kojima game, in the vein of Snatcher. I actually just played through Police Nuts earlier this year, so it is kind of fresh on the mind. Very story-oriented game, dialogue heavy, and the thing that I like the most about the thing that's most impressive anyway about Police Nuts is the world building. There is so much like little tidbits of information about the world that you can find by inspecting random stuff and reading the encyclopedia as you're playing through it. And if you like that stuff, you will be in heaven with Police Nuts. The story is not as great as a lot of games of this kind. It's definitely, in my opinion, not as good as Snatcher. One thing that is a little cringy about this game is that you can basically violate various women NPCs that you meet throughout the game with no consequence. Like, I mean, literally, like, it's like, dang, Kojima, what were you thinking? Like, really, this would not fly today if this was released brand new. So yeah, if you're sensitive to that, I would say stay away from this. And I'm not even trying to imply in any way that that's okay, by the way. But I'm one who can separate cringy stuff from the good stuff, so I'm okay with owning and trying it out. But yeah, Police Nuts is good. Not quite the greatest of Kojima, but I definitely enjoyed the playthrough. Here is Prikura Daisakusen. This is an arcade. I think this was originally in arcades. This is an isometric shoot 'em up. I don't know how you call it. I wouldn't call it a shoot 'em up, but it's an isometric action game where you move around and shoot things, and act very actiony. And yeah, it's got co-op, as you can tell from the two characters. And I haven't played this one very much, so I can't give too much of an opinion. But I believe the main character or main characters were from a certain arcade fighting game that already existed, but I'm forgetting which one. Yeah, if you like co-op, that's one definitely to think of. Unfortunately, I can't give a more detailed review. Princess Crown. This is the spiritual predecessor to Odin Sphere for PlayStation 2. And this game's got nice and unique art style and look to it. I am waiting for someone to release a translation patch for this game. I believe there's one in the works, or at least there's a translation guide. I don't know. This is one I look forward to trying at some point. It's like a side-scrolling, action-ish RPG thingy. Like, I don't think it's too heavy on the RPG elements, but I think it's got some, like Odin Sphere does. Seems like a cool game. Got ported onto the PSP years later. Fortunately, never got an English release. Princess Crown. Here we have Puyo Puyo 2. This is actually like a ripped off. No, this is not. This game is missing the manual. This is like a supplemental image that came with the game. But I believe this is Puyo Puyo 2. This was originally on the arcades and then Super Nintendo and Genesis, I believe, and now PlayStation and Saturn, I think. Or was it on PlayStation? Probably was, because everything was on PlayStation. Not everything, but blah, blah, blah. I'm just yapping. But yeah, Puyo Puyo, I mean, I've talked about it before. Puyo Puyo is not very beginner-friendly. It's a little bit more geared toward the expert puzzle gamers, in my opinion. But it's got like really cutesy characters and a lot of personality. And yeah, this is a pretty good version of Puyo Puyo 2. And then there's also Puyo Puyo Sun. Oh, what am I doing? Here, Puyo Puyo Sun. And this it's kind of more, mostly more of the same, but it adds some new content. There's these sun things. I forgot exactly how they work, but like there's these sun blocks that can come down on the field and greatly affect the gameplay. And there's, of course, you can play without them if you want to. And yeah, it just seems like a pretty solid Puyo Puyo version. I'm not sure if it's really worth going back to this version with all the newer versions of Puyo that there are now, but certainly nothing wrong with it in and of itself. Here is Rabbit, and Rabbit is a fighting game, and I believe it's good, but I struggle to like remember it. I know I fired this one up within the past year, but I don't remember exactly what it felt like to play it. At some point, I'm going to have a friend over and be like, hey, you want to play a random fighting game that I don't know how to play? And someday, we will do that with Rabbit. Don't know when that's going to be. Could be next week. Could be 10 years from now. We'll see. Such is the way of the collector. Oh boy, here's a big one. Radiant Silvergun. This is one of the first games I ever imported. I think it's like the second game I ever imported. And this is a shoot 'em up by Treasure, the same guys who did like Gunstar Heroes, Dynamite Heady, all that, and Ikaruga. And this game is really, 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 really good. And it's a little different than regular shooters, in which you have like 7 weapons. Rather than focusing on collecting power-ups throughout the stage, you actually like gradually increase in power as you're playing. And you can actually, if you're playing you can play the arcade mode where you start at 0 power, but if you're playing console mode, you'll level up, basically, and you'll keep your level ups the more you play. So eventually your weapons will get strong enough so that you do pretty well. But it's just so much fun to use all the different weapons in this game. And the enemies and the bosses and the levels are just so well designed. It's challenging without being too cheap. There's also quite a bit of a story with this one too, like a lot of voice dialogue and stuff, which obviously is in Japanese. Actually, if you really want to play Radiant Silvergun, it did get an English release on Xbox Live Arcade. I actually like the Saturn version a little bit more, but the Xbox version is pretty solid too. So I would say check that out. Radiant Silvergun is totally worth it. Love this game, one of the reasons. Well, not one of the reasons I got a Saturn, but one of the reasons I started importing, because I heard this game was that good. Here we have Riglord Saga 2. This is the sequel to Mystaria Realms of Lore, which we looked at in the last episode. Strategy RPG, untranslated. I got it for really, really cheap, and I'm not sure if I'm honestly going to play this one. Maybe I shouldn't have bought it. I don't know. But, it's a strategy RPG, Fire Emblem-ish. It would be interesting kind of to see how much they improved it over Mystaria, but I can't really say too much about it right now because I just haven't played it that much. Ooh, here we have another Konami pack. It's the Salamander Deluxe Pack Plus. This contains Life Force, Salamander, and Salamander 2. So, Life Force and Salamander are basically the same game with different power-up systems. One is more like Gradius, one is more simple than Gradius. They're very solid shoot-em-ups, the Salamander games. Salamander was released on, Life Force was released on NES in America, so a lot of people know it as that. These are the arcade versions, so these are probably a little better. I don't know, I'm not a Salamander expert, but these are cool games with like neat, like kind of freaky looking bosses and enemies and stuff. Like you got a brain there and you got this thing with, looks like something out of like an alien movie or something. But definitely recommend it if you like shoot 'em ups. Here we have Saturn Bomberman Fight. This is very different from your typical bomber game because you're not wandering around a maze. It's actually an isometric game where you have this little square-shaped arena and you're walking around. You can plant bombs and stuff, and you actually have a life bar instead of getting one hit and you get killed. This is only up to 4 players as opposed to other Bombermans, which are usually 5+. But it's a fun game. I wouldn't say this is better than regular Bomberman, but it's a fun little thing that's different. Different kind of a Bomberman game, and in my opinion, worth having if you like stuff to play with friends. Oh, here's a fun one right here. Sega Sanshiro Shinken Yugi. This is, Sega Sanshiro was the Sega Saturn's big mascot in Japan that helped it do well over there. And this was at the end of the run of the commercials. It had been really successful, and this is kind of a bonus disc with a bunch of like mini games and extras about Sega Sanshiro, and you can obviously view all the commercials on here too. I haven't played it too much, but I had to have it. I mean, Sega Sanshiro is pretty awesome. Sexy Parodius. This is the 5th and last Parodius game. Unlike Jikyo, this one went back to being released for arcades first. This one does stuff with it where it has like missions and like branching paths, so like whether or not you do the mission determines what level you play next and stuff. I do really like this game, but it's definitely not as good as Jikyo. I'd say Jikyo's my favorite, followed by Gokujo, then Sexy, then Da in the original on MSX. That's my opinion. It's pretty good. It's called Sexy because of the story is about like the octopus really wants to get girls or something, and there's a little bit of risque stuff in here, but not as much as you might think. I don't know, but I would recommend it. I love Parodius. Here we have the first game I ever imported. We got Shining Force 3 Scenario 2. I already talked about Shining Force 3 Scenario 1. This is the continuation. You play, it takes place at the same time as Scenario 1, but you're playing as a different character. You get a different view of the story, and that's really cool. I already gave my opinion on that before. But then here is Scenario 3. This is definitely the best of the 3. This starts out midway through the first 2 and then concludes the story. This game is pretty awesome. One of my favorite strategy RPGs for sure. And comes to a really fun conclusion, and like you can continue with save data from the previous two scenarios, which is great. And like at the end of scenario 3, you can control your armies from the first two games one last time, which I really like. And yeah, it does a great job of wrapping up the trilogy. Yeah, definitely recommend it if you like Shining Force, strategy RPGs, all that good stuff. And then we have the Shining Force 3 Premium Disc. This is a bonus disc which has a bunch of special features, but also has special boss battles you can do with like characters from the old Shining Force games. And what's cool is that you can compile a team with characters from all three of your, like 12 of any characters from the first 3 games, basically. But the problem is the boss fights aren't terribly interesting. They're kind of just slogs. It's fun that they're there, but I really like Shining Force 3. I'm a big fan, so I'm glad to have this. I wouldn't call it essential, though, unless you really like it as much as I do. Here is, what is this game called again? Okay, this is weird. I'm actually blanking on this. Oh, it's Kingdom Grand Prix. That's what it is. I got this, like, less than a year ago, and so I'm not terribly familiar with it. Yeah, it says it right there on the cover. Duh. Kingdom Grand Prix. So this is a shoot-'em-up, and I believe it has, like, a racing element to it, where, like, there's NPCs that are also, like, playing the game, sort of, and you're trying to, like, race against them or something. And it's a pretty cool game, but I haven't played it very much. I think I only fired it up once, to be honest. But, yeah, unique little shoot-'em-up, cool thing for the Saturn library. Here we have another treasure game. It's Silhouette Mirage. This came out for the PlayStation in America, but that version had a lot of changes, and it's generally considered not as good. This version, it's kind of a weird game. It's a side-scrolling action game, and you can... Your character has like 2 modes, Silhouette and Mirage, depending on which direction they're facing. And like different enemies are like susceptible to one or the other and stuff. And I didn't like it quite as much as I thought I would. Like this game, a lot of people really like this game, and it is definitely a quirky, interesting, cool game. But like, I don't know. Like I felt like it was kind of hard for me to get into. Maybe I just didn't like play it right. I don't know, or something. But yeah, I'll give it another shot someday. Here we have Sokyo Gorente Otokuyo, also known as Terra Diver. And this is a shoot 'em up. Another one of those shoot 'em ups that doesn't really it doesn't reinvent the wheel. It doesn't do anything like all that unique, but it's just really, really well designed. I really like the graphics, music, and everything. Just really solid gameplay, and yeah, I guess I don't have that much else to say about it. It's just a really fun shoot 'em up, and I recommend it. Here we have Steam Gear Mash. This is an early isometric platformer, very cartoony, whimsical kind of game. You control this robot, and it's not terribly a long game. I think there's only like 5 total longish levels, and you can beat it pretty quick. But yeah, fun little game. Not anything that's gonna blow you away. But yeah, it was cheap, so picked it up, played it, enjoyed it. If you like isometric games, then it's not the worst pickup in the world. It's not going to set you back very much either. Here we have Street Fighter 03, also known as Street Fighter Alpha 3. This is arguably the best version of the game. It's basically arcade perfect. This actually came out after the Dreamcast version, believe it or not, and it's better than the Dreamcast version. It has, the PSP version has the extra content that's in this version as well, but it's a PSP game. You can't just throw a controller to your friend and play it with them. So, the PSP version has the most content. But this has a nice balance of being a home console version and also having a lot of content, a lot of which is not in other versions. Downside is that it's in Japanese, but I mean, it's not that important for a fighting game. Yeah, Street Fighter Alpha 3 is one of the most popular Street Fighter games, and for good reason. There's a lot of characters and cool modes and stuff, and it's just well made. Yeah, happy to have that as part of the collection. Ooh, here's a game I really like. Here is House of the Dead, the original. There is an American version of this game, but it's a lot rarer and a lot more expensive than the Japanese version. So I have this version. There's really not any language barrier. This is, as you might know, a light gun game from arcades. The graphics were dumbed down a lot for the Saturn version, but it doesn't really bother me. It's still, the gameplay is totally intact, and that's what's really important. It's a really fun light gun game. It's very challenging, but done well in my opinion. A lot of fun. Highly recommended if you enjoy arcade gun games. Vampire Savior, also known as Darkstalkers 3, and this is a really fun 2D fighter from Capcom. Again, there's a PlayStation version, but it's not as good. Yeah, really kind of Halloweenish theme with characters that are, I wouldn't really call them silly, but like they're also not terribly serious either. You got like literally a spoof on Red Riding Hood there. Like, it's a little weird. But yeah, really fun game, good gameplay, creative characters, and a nice little like Halloween theme to it. Highly recommend it if you like fighting games. Although I don't know, what like the best Darkstalkers game in existence is, but that's certainly a contender, I would think. Here we have Wachenroder, which is kind of a game that's inspired by the German language, I guess. And strategy RPG. Story seems kind of intriguing. It's about like this guy's sister gets sick, so he like goes out on a journey to find the cure or something. If I remember right. It's been a long time since I started a file. I found a little bit of trouble getting into this, but it seems like a decent enough strategy RPG. Pretty cheap too. There's a translation guide online. I don't know if this game will ever get patched. It would be great if this game got patched, but yeah, some cool music in here. Graphics are not the best, but interesting strategy RPG. Wish it would get a resting release somehow. Here is Willy Wombat, which has English voice acting. I believe they planned a US release and canceled it. But this is like a 3D platformer sort of game, and it seems alright to me. I've tried getting into it a couple times. Had a little bit of trouble getting into it, but some people do like this game. And the English voice acting is kind of interesting to me. At some point I'll probably finish it. But yeah, this one doesn't cost too much, and it's a solid little 3D platformer thing. And then last but not least, we have X-Men vs. Street Fighter. This was the first full-out Capcom versus game ever made. And it's a good one. It basically has that frantic gameplay that I already talked about from Marvel vs. Street Fighter. And also kind of the same type of gameplay as Marvel vs. Capcom and Marvel vs. Capcom 2, which a lot of you have probably played. And the main problem with this version, this particular game, is that it's very easy. Even on the highest difficulty, the computer really won't give you that much trouble. But yeah, really fun 2D fighter, and the Saturn version is very, very close to the arcade, which is much appreciated. The PlayStation version of this game is abysmal. And yeah, that's it. I have gone through all my Saturn games in 2 videos, which is something cool. I really like the Sega Saturn. I think it's the most underrated system ever, and I hope you see why after seeing all those cool games. Stay tuned, because PlayStation is next, and that one's going to take probably a few videos. I have a lot of PlayStation games. Thank you for watching, all 3 of you who watched probably, and have a great rest of your day.